So I always knew there was a very big psychological piece to food and your relationship with food. And I had even seen it in my career. I spent a lot of my career working closely with kids who have cancer. And there were a lot of issues with food, whether it was a parent's desire to control what their kids were eating or weren't eating, or using food as a tool for healing, or even the kids' desire to control what they were eating because everything else in their life was out of their control.
Well, welcome, Madison. We're so glad you've joined us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Madison, you bring so many different angles that I almost can't believe we haven't talked yet on the podcast, or I haven't met you some other way.
Yes, yeah, this has been a journey of me getting to this place. So I just started kind of reaching out and, being interviewed on podcasts really in the last year or so. So
And I think we found out about you over Instagram, which is pretty great when good things happen over social media, right?
very true, very true. I have a love-hate relationship with social media for sure.
Yes, I think you're not alone in that for sure. Okay, so um, the first question I have out of the gate has nothing to do with the topic or trauma informed anything. My question to you is, what is your favorite family tradition? It can be a Christmas tradition, it can be other times of the year, and it can be
Mm.
your current family, like if you could tell us some about that, or it could be like your family of origin.
Yeah, oh, that's hard. Um, I might have to choose two, if
Okay.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Christmas is definitely my favorite holiday. So, and something that I actually did not grow up doing at Christmas, but that I've started doing, my husband and I and our kids, is Advent, every Christmas season. And so we have, I don't know, maybe eight at least Advent books, and we kind of just rotate or we just pick a different one each year. And sometimes we add more to the collection. But just being able to sit down after dinner and light the candles and, read something that really helps us focus on what the whole purpose of Christmas, really our whole, our faith is founded on that Christ came for us, and just being able to focus on that almost every night. There are some nights when things are a little crazy and we don't, but we usually start around December 1st and we have that time together. And my kids love it. They love lighting the candles. And sometimes we'll have like a little treat or something because we'll do it after a meal. And they really, really enjoy that. And I do too. It just helps all of our hearts be really in the right place, instead of just thinking about what gifts we want and, all those other selfish things that can come up, even for me, even for adults. But then my other tradition, also one that we've started, but I guess it started as a child for me a little bit, is just family vacations. I don't know if that's really a tradition, but
Heck yeah. I
that's,
say
yeah. I
yes.
mean, it's like a better than any gift, like any material gift. I love family trips, and we've started, my husband and I, every summer we go down to the Mississippi Gulf Coast where he has his brother's family lives, and his whole side of the family, his parents and his sister's family. We all go down and visit, and we get to go to the beach, and it's just been a fun family tradition that we started, I guess, about 5 years ago or so.
Okay, so where are you located?
I'm in Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay, so driving down to the Mississippi Gulf is not
It's not, it's
terribly
six
far.
out. It's like 6 hours, I
Okay,
think.
great.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm picking up that you're married.
Yes.
Okay, and how many
Mhm.
kids do you have?
We have two adopted daughters.
Okay, awesome.
So yeah, ironically, my husband and I, we were married in 2014, and both of our girls, they're 11 right now. They're the same age for like 2 months. They're about 10 months apart. They're not biologically related. But they were also born in 2014. So little did we know when God was orchestrating our marriage in that year that there were two other children also being born that year that he knew would eventually be in our family. And we've been foster parents since 2017.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So we'll get into that because I'd love to hear more about that. But I want to go back to your comments about Advent. So I found just this book unearthed. Like I literally don't know where it came from, but I was digging through a box and it's called Voices of Advent. I don't know if you've heard of
Oh,
it,
I don't think I
but
have that
it's
one.
pretty great. It's like from the perspective of Isaiah, from the perspective of, prophets, from the perspective of Luke, it's those voices coming together. And one is each chapter, of course, a day of Advent. And I'm reading it again because I do love
Yeah.
Advent and I love your tradition and that. And I also picked up the hint that you at least try to have family dinners together, which I would love to talk about as well.
Yes.
But no, and Christmas, well, you add those two together, you have a Christmas vacation, but any kind of vacation, you know, I love to be like that super nerdy mom that's like, guys, we're making a memory. And all the kids roll their eyes, because you might not remember what you got in Christmas 20, 2007 or whatever,
Or
but
even
you
last year.
remember. Do what?
Or even last year, you might not
Or
remember.
exactly.
You're
Exactly.
right.
I don't remember what I got last year, but I
Yeah.
remember that vacation time or I remember that trip or
Mhm.
whatever. Yeah. So, yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if you can tell us some about your background, you're a
Sure.
pediatric dietitian, you're adoptive and foster mom. But first, let's go into the pediatric dietitian. Like, I guess one of the biggest questions that I feel like I've never understood, and maybe I'm not alone in this, what is the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian? You probably get this question all the time, but please enlighten
Yeah.
us. Help us to know the difference and kind of what your
Sure.
role is.
Absolutely. I love this question because it is commonly misunderstood, I think. And there's some gray area. It kind of depends on the state that you live in, what the state laws are. Where I am in the state of Tennessee, so I'm a licensed dietitian nutritionist, LDN, and a registered dietitian nutritionist. So the registration is a national registration. So I have an undergraduate degree in nutrition, and then I had to do a postgraduate internship, dietetic internship, and then I had to take a board examination and pass that. And then every 5 years, I have to submit my basically continuing education hours to verify, that I'm continuing in my education, that I'm qualified to practice as a registered dietitian. And then in order to practice in your state, you have to have a state license. And so some states, it's just an LD, a licensed dietitian. And then other states like mine, it's an LDN. So the state of Tennessee, anyone in the state of Tennessee, and there's multiple states, there's probably at least, I don't know, 25, maybe half, or more. I should know off the top of my head, though I can't remember. Many states require that if you are calling yourself a nutritionist, you have to be a dietitian. So, again, if someone in Tennessee is practicing as a nutritionist, but they're not a dietitian, they haven't gone through those qualifications that I mentioned, then they're technically falsely advertising what they're doing. Because you can get an undergraduate degree or even a master's degree in nutrition. And so some people do call themselves nutritionists and they practice nutrition. But again, it depends on what state you're in if you're allowed to do that without also being a dietitian or not. So it's basically just extra credentialing, extra training, and extra content. There is a board that's examining and making sure that you are, you know, being ethical and that you're continuing to get the necessary education to practice. So and we can provide medical nutrition therapy. So a lot of dietitians work in hospitals, which is what I did for most of my career until about a year and a half ago. And so, we're able to do a lot of really like hands-on medical assistance for individuals with chronic diseases or acute
Yeah.
illnesses.
Okay. So, some of our listeners may be saying, oh my goodness, we're going to talk about food today. And I say yes to that. We are talking about food today. And I think sometimes people hear that and they're like, oh no, we're talking about, she's going to tell me all the things I'm not supposed to eat, blah, blah, blah. Or they're like, yes, we're talking about food. I can't wait. So I would say, like, everybody hang on. It's going to be a great
Please.
conversation because really your specialty has to do with trauma and food. And can you tell us some about that?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm one of those people that loves to talk about food. Obviously, I love food. That's part of why I became a dietitian. So please hang in there. I'm definitely not going to be telling people what not to eat. Yeah, I guess as I was working, again, and it was about 28 or 2017 when my husband and I became foster parents. We right away started to notice that there were some issues, feeding challenges that were coming up with some of the kids that we were caring for. And some of them were things that I had heard about a little bit, but I had not heard a lot of how to, how to help in these situations. Um, and even before that, I was really interested in eating disorders, and had thought that I might be an eating disorder dietitian. There's a specialty certification you can get in order to work with people with eating disorders. And so I always knew there was a very big psychological piece to food and your relationship with food. And I had even seen it in my career. I spent a lot of my career working closely with kids who have cancer, and there were a lot of issues with food. Whether it was a parent's desire to control what their kids were eating or weren't eating, or using food as a tool for healing, or even the kids' desire to control what they were eating because everything else in their life was out of their control. And so I'd kind of already been seeing this coming up. And then we started to see this in our just personal experience as parents. And then I would just start to hear more from other adoptive parents or foster parents about different feeding struggles they were experiencing in their homes, and just people being really desperate, like wanting to help, but not knowing exactly what to do. And so I just felt so privileged. Not that I always had the answers. I mean, there were many times and still many times where I'm like, I don't know the exact right thing to do in this situation. But because I had this background, of course, in nutrition and this understanding about eating disorders, and the psychology of food and our relationship with food, it really helped me. And then, of course, our trauma informed training, kind of marrying those things together, it just helped me feel like I had at least some little bits of, support, or little bits of encouragement that I could provide to people. And so that kind of eventually led to me saying, hey, I think I'm going to try to just do this. As I had little time with my full-time job and then parenting, and I was like, I want to help. I really want to help people because people need help and they need support. But it was just hard to find the time to do that. And so then I started Nourish with Connection, mostly just using social media to kind of raise awareness about these issues and what you might see, because a lot of times people just aren't expecting these things when they come up, and then providing some support for how to handle just some different common issues that families experience.
Yeah, and like food is relentless, right? You cannot not eat. You know, it's just constantly a part of our day, a part of our lives, which is a really good thing in a lot of ways. But if trauma and mental health challenges are kind of wrapped up into some of that, I mean, it's a multiple time of a day sort of reminder
Struggle,
and
yeah.
challenge that we're facing. And so I'm really curious, like how many people are out there doing what you're doing? Like it seems like a subspecialty, but I mean, it sounds so vital to, this zone that we're in trauma informed practices.
Yeah, I agree. And I honestly haven't found many people. There are some trauma-informed dietitians, and they're mostly in this space working with individuals with eating disorders. And so I became really passionate about trying to help in this area because I wanted to help prevent eating disorders. And I felt like there was a gap in, the support for people before they get to that point. Like, I think there is a very good amount of support, like I said, eating disorder dietitians who are very trauma informed. Um, but it's really devastating to know that people have to get to that point of desperation, where they've already developed a diagnosis. And so I honestly haven't found a lot of them, but most of the people I've connected with are people who work with individuals with eating disorders, as far as
Okay.
dietitians who are trauma informed.
Okay. And so what you're doing is different in what way? You're working specifically with families or to try to prevent
Yes.
it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
I
And
gotcha.
I'm not necessarily so I do have my greatest hope is to be able to work more one-on-one with families. I've kind of been I haven't really been advertising that much. I started homeschooling my kids also at the same time that I started this endeavor. So right now, a lot of what I'm doing is just providing some free resources, free education, information through social media, through a monthly newsletter, just to give people a little bit of support, a little bit of education to help them be able to support these needs that they might be experiencing in their home so that their kids don't get to, this desperate place where they're now needing to seek eating disorder help or other issues where they just have a severed relationship with their child because, they couldn't see eye to eye on things. And so really just trying to help provide the resources that they need for that.
Yeah. Okay. This is awesome. I'm so glad to be talking with you. And so let's kind of get into this a little bit. So on your website, you talk about, how stress and control around food can impact families. Now, from my angle, like stress and control are two very different things, but I mean, they obviously overlap. So, how do stress and control around food like impact families? Like, tell us
Sure.
how does this flesh out? What does this look like?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we know stress impacts all of us differently, and trauma. Like any two people can have the exact same experience and have very vastly different responses to it. And that's just biology, that's just, how we're made. And it has to do with other experiences we've had in our past that may affect how we respond to that. So, but what we know about stress, of course, there are hormones that are increased, adrenaline, cortisol, and a lot of times those stress hormones can affect our appetite. They can affect digestion. They can affect just, of course, our long-term health if it's chronic stress. That's why we know there's effects of, there's an increased risk for heart disease and metabolic disorders and all these things, especially, when we study ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, which is more like toxic stress and trauma. But even just minor stress, like when I'm a little anxious or nervous about something, maybe I'm, at a dinner with, people I don't know, or it's for, a business, there's something on the line, and then my appetite is not going to be very good. And that's just very common. Now, there are some people, though, who respond to stress in a way where it can increase their appetite. And it's kind of a way that they cope with stress. And so, again, everybody responds differently. But a lot of times, the way our bodies respond to stress, it does affect our relationship with food. And then when it comes to control, what I've seen a lot, just in my professional experience and personal experience, is that, especially with kids who've experienced really hard things, is everything is pretty much out of their control. And one of the few things that they can control, they can't control who they're going to be living with or when they're going to see their family or where they go to school or sometimes what they get to wear. I mean,
Right.
there's so little that they can, but they may not even get to choose what they're eating in some homes, but they can choose yes, I will eat or no, I will not, or how much they will eat. And so
Right.
it's kind of this coping mechanism where they can feel like they have a sense of control, and not that that's always a bad thing, but it is important to really recognize that that can cause eventually, if not, if there aren't if we aren't giving our kids tools to help with that, then they could end up having an eating disorder. Kids with four or more ACEs are like almost 6 times more likely to develop eating disorders. And so, and my understanding and experience has been a lot of that is largely because it's one thing that they can control.
Four or more ACEs, the child is 6 times more likely.
Yes, I think it's like 5.7 times more likely or something like that.
Wow.
I have this stat. I can send it to you to make sure it's precise. But
Yeah.
yes.
And just a reminder, we did say this, but for folks who are listening, ACEs, that stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. This is a 10-question assessment that is available in doctor's offices, online, and whatever. And it's basically an assessment to find out what your experience was as you were growing up and
Right.
different challenges that you may have faced as a child. And so the
Mhm.
more of those that stack up, there's statistics and probabilities in terms of like health outcomes for that. And so that's why it's often used in doctors' offices because it helps practices to know how to come alongside their patients in a meaningful way.
Absolutely.
So that's what ACEs are. And so wow, okay, because I think sometimes we think about eating disorders and it's just this perplexing thing, like we just don't understand how does a child, a teenager, an adult develop an eating disorder. Where did it start? How to overcome. And I do have people in my life that struggle with eating disorders, and
Mhm.
man, I wish that I could just magically make it go away. Certainly, as a person of faith, I do pray for them, but
Yeah.
I know it is such a battle. So I appreciate these stats that you're bringing up. And
Mhm.
wow, what great work you're doing to help impact families before these things are, unfolding in a
Sure.
way that's diagnosable.
Right.
And yeah, okay, so I wanted to share my own sort of confessional story and with how I raised my kids, and I'm in no way saying that I did this right. In fact, I'm saying I probably messed this up, but I want to present myself as like a typical maybe family that you would work with.
Sure.
So when I was growing up, my parents, especially from like age 12 on, were pretty absent. And
Mm.
that's a whole nother story. But and even before that, I really, and maybe it was my generation, I don't know, I'm Gen X. So I don't know all the whys, but I just know that I didn't learn anything about food, about what was healthy portions, healthy, what's a healthy food. I mean, we don't want to have labels around that stuff. And I want you to correct me on any of this, but um, food that is nutritious, food that helps my body in this way, and food that's just like delicious and, you know, um, bonds us for an experience together or whatever. Like I never was taught anything about any of that growing up.
Mm.
And when I got to my teenage years and adulthood, I just felt like completely ill equipped to manage my own nutrition, much less anyone else's. And so I began to read a lot and study and,
Yeah.
understand more about it. And so certainly not my degree or my expertise, but I just got to understand a little bit more. So then when I had kids, and then certainly as my family grew into be, larger, because we have, for our listeners that don't know, we have 5 kids. 4 of them are adopted, and the youngest 3 are a biological sibling group from Colombia. And so they came to us as a set. And so when the girls came and they were ages 3, 5, and 7, and And, I really wanted to be intentional about helping them to understand the difference between nutritious food and food
Sure.
for experience and, all the different things to
Yeah.
help them in their relationship with food. And um, also, I know that growing up in my experience was there was a lot of shame around food
Mm,
and shame around like how much you ate and the
yeah.
kind that you ate and then what you look like. And so I was
Mm,
like, I was gonna be very intentional with my kids, especially my girls,
yeah.
that is not we're not going to do that at our house. We're not going to have shame around food. And so I did the best that I could, and yet I would say that by and large it's still very difficult
Mm,
to manage these conversations, to
mm.
manage food. Like, how do families, I'd love to hear your thoughts about how we raised our kids, but I'm also curious, like, how do families, um, talk about nutrition without making it a focus, where it's like
Yes.
too much, How do we like approach it with kids where we're talking about portions and we're talking about nutritious elements of food and a variety of foods, by while at the same time not making it a big deal that
Yes.
becomes something traumatic and
Right.
shameful, in
Right.
their minds, even though we're not trying to.
Right.
All of that to
Absolutely.
say, I'd love to hear your thoughts and your responses.
Yeah. I love that question. I think it's such a good question. And I think the fact that you're asking that question shows that most likely whatever you would say about food or how you would handle it most likely wouldn't cause like significant harm or any long-term harm because the fact that you're even aware, that you do have to be careful that words and how we talk about food, diet culture, how we talk about bodies, shame, those things especially affect women and girls, but really everyone. And so just being aware of that shows that you are probably not doing anything wrong, and we are human and we're not going to do everything perfectly, but there is a balance because it's not just, oh, let's just eat all the ultra processed foods and pretend like health isn't important, because obviously food is a very important piece of our health for sure. And so it can feel like a fine line to balance that. um, I would say it kind of depends on the kid, of course, and their ages. Um, but really helping them to lead the conversation in a way, like as they start to show interest and talk about food, like a lot of times they start, like my kids will come home and they'll say something like, um, I'm trying to think of something. I feel like they said something recently like, well, I wouldn't eat that because that's so unhealthy. And I'll be like, okay, well, tell me about this. Like, what makes you think this is unhealthy? And why, where did you hear that? And what about it is unhealthy to you? And then we'll kind of start to have a conversation about health. And even we can even talk about that specific food, like, whether it's chips or something. And we'll even talk about, okay, well, processed foods. And again, you kind of have to tailor it to their age level and
Sure.
their developmental level. But just being really practical, like this is what the food contains. This is how it can fuel our body, how it can help our body, but it can't fuel our body a lot. Like if we only ate that, which you could say that of any food, even, the healthiest food, if that's the only thing we ate, or we only ate a few other things, like our bodies wouldn't get all the vitamins and minerals and the other macronutrients we need to function. And so, just kind of being like not using your opinion very much, but just very pragmatic. Like these are the facts about the food. But then, and some kids may not be as curious and may not lead the conversation as much. So, I mean, even when you're eating a meal or eating a snack, like a lot of times I'll just kind of narrate, like, oh, I think I forgot to eat. I haven't had any fruit today. I think I might go eat some fruit. Like, kind of just being that example to them. And then you can even say, like, I always feel more full. Like I feel like my breakfast lasts longer when I've had some fiber with my meal or some protein. And then you can kind of, as they show interest, you can kind of teach them how we have, carbohydrates and proteins and fats and how all these things work together to fuel our bodies. And so it's really important and helpful when our meals have a diverse amount of these things. And so you're basically just teaching them, kind of nutrition science at its basics without saying, ugh, oh, I feel so gross whenever I eat this. Or, it's it's all about kind of our language and our opinion. Like if you're adding a lot of opinion to what you're saying, then that can be kind of a red flag. And please, just for anyone out there, I think one of my biggest pet peeves is hearing people talk about foods being toxic. Um, it just it hurts my heart because it's a really unhealthy term to use. It confuses, especially children. It's very confusing to them if they hear so and so's parent said sugar is toxic or said, food dyes are toxic or this whatever. And they're like, but I thought toxic things were like poisonous and, can really harm you and can kill you, and it's very confusing. And it's like those things are not toxic. We want to, again, if it's not factual, don't say it. So
Right.
that's an opinion. And it can be harmful and confusing to kids because then they're asking questions like, well, why did my parents let me eat this? Or, you know, um, so that's kind of my basic recommendation is give them facts as they show interest. And even if they're not that interested yet, just kind of narrate, what you do and how you make the choices that you make with your body. There's a lot more that I could say to that, but that's yeah. I'll if you have questions about that, maybe I'll ruminate a minute and think
Oh my
what
goodness.
else.
I feel like we've just touched the tip of the iceberg, and we're going to have all of your, your links and everything, and so that folks can get in touch with you in
Yes.
the future. But I love that you also added, so narrating, giving facts, and you also added having a sense of curiosity, which is beautiful, really. But I think one of the hard parts about narrating and giving, just facts and not opinion is like, where am I with food? Like,
True.
what's going on for me with food? And so how can I stop, any, generational sort of negative feelings about myself and food and body image and all of, how can I halt some of that into, the next generation by like really being aware of my own feelings about food and how
Yeah.
I was raised. So, I mean, just like
That
any
is,
other like topic around trauma, mental health challenges, I mean, it starts with me, right? It starts with
you're so right.
myself and the self, person in it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love your examples and very concrete, practical, suggestions.